Hi there, I'm Christine Zibbs. I'd like to begin by sharing a story made more special by its being true. Once upon a time, not so long ago, a lovely and valiant truth warrior in Cape Town, South Africa, introduced her friend, an esteemed neuroscientist from Stockholm, Sweden, to me. Associate Professor Olle Johansson is a world-leading authority in the field of EMF radiation and health effects. He coined the term screen dermatitis, which later was developed into the functional impairment electrohypersensitivity, which recognition mainly is due to his work. Aware of his accomplishments, I was delighted to meet this man, even if through the wonders of modern technology. Ironically, this technology, especially the wireless variety, is what both Oli and I have turned attention to, especially how it impacts our children. So important are these goals, Oli once said in an address to Danish elected representatives. We are not here to promote convenience or economic growth, but only to serve and protect human health and biological safety, as well as to protect other animals, plants, and bacteria. These aims must be our only target. Our friends soon suggested that we might produce an interview together. I was delighted when Oli said yes, and soon the series on health impacts from EMF radiation was created. You'll find a link to that below, along with additional links relating to this presentation. Several months later, he participated in my Back to School 2020 What Parents Should Know series. Now, while the details of Oli's career, his many lecture engagements and publications feature many well-deserved accomplishments and acknowledgments, there are also elements of intrigue, suspense, conspiracy, espionage, coercion conducted on an international stage that could compete with a spy novel. I'd like to share that it's been my esteemed honor to have grown a lovely friendship that I cherish with this noble, kind, and friendly man. He has reminded me to make sure that I have all my facts correct before sharing further. He is a scientist, following the practice of spending your time challenging a thesis before revealing it as fact. It's been my observation that his personal and professional code of ethics are beyond reproach. He has managed to continue his work in the face of adversity for many years. To share more about this remarkable man and scientist follows is a sampling of video clips from his many public appearances and interviews. Ole takes opportunities wherever he can to raise awareness as he shares in this interview with me.
Some months ago, I traveled one of the Stockholm commuter trains, and wherever I go in the world, I always take the chance to put some mental seeds into the brain of others. And I saw this 60-year-aged, very posh lady, and she was using her smartphone. And since no one knows who I am, I leant forward and said, "Hey, do you know that the World Health Organization in Geneva in Switzerland has classified the radiation from your smartphone and cell phone?" And she got very angry with me, and told me to mind my own business, and I didn't know what I was talking about, and so on. And she actually yelled at me in the train compartment. But I said, wait. I mean, you have a smartphone. Couldn't you please, just for my sake, Google WHO, brain tumor, and cell phone radiation? And she did, and went silent for 2-3 minutes. And then slowly she looked up at me and said, with blushing cheeks, I would say, "I'm very, very sorry," she said. "You are completely right. But now I get angry again," she said, "but not at you, but at the Swedish government and parliament and health authorities. Why have they not informed me? You see, I am a parent and nowadays also a grandparent. And just recently I bought a new smartphone for my grandchild who is 12 years of age. And now I really regret it. So that kind of puts immediately focus on what's going on, partly behind the curtains and behind the scene, but partly also in front of it. And many parents are not aware of that the World Health Organization has classified this radiation in 2011, so that's a long time ago, and its association to brain tumors. And 10 years before that, the so-called power frequent magnetic fields and its association to childhood leukemia.
Absolutely.
And when I, for instance, in Sweden, give lectures and tell parents, I can tell you that not even parents from the telecom industry likes this. They get really upset. And maybe this is one of several reasons why countries such as the Solomon Islands, Uganda, Nigeria in Africa, Indonesia, Malaysia, and above all China has put strong bans on the usage of cell phones, tablets, and laptops in schools. And there is a very big organization, I know the United States was one of the first to join it, and it's called the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It's short an OECD. And they came forward recently with a very big report clearly showing that the more screen time in school, the less good grades in school. So the message I would say to school board members and also to parents is to do their own homework, sit down and start reading, thinking, and coming up with the optimal solution for the pupils and students. And maybe that would mean to kind of take a few steps backwards, as many countries already have done. France, for instance, in Europe, also have strong bans on these gadgets in schools.
Olle answers an interview question regarding irreversible sterility within 5 generations.
Do you think that there is a chance that within the 3rd generation of females, they may be irreversibly sterile?
Not in the 3rd generation, but in the 5th generation, and that would for humans be something in the order of 150 years ahead of us. And of course, then it's too late to say that you are sorry, and it's very too late to say stop. So I would suggest that you have, at least for the time being, a moratorium, a stop to these systems, use a wide in the meantime, and check out for effects of radiation. And again, as you said yourself, there is a wealth of papers. I mean, we're talking about thousands of published papers in the scientific literature, few of which, or sometimes none of which, have entered the official documentations from authorities and likewise. So I think it's really time to have an independent compilation of data. Such was done at August 31st, 2007 in the form of the Bioinitiative report, of which I was one of the authors. And then we put together approximately 2,000 scientific references on a little bit more than 600 pages, clearly saying that if you, for instance, if you are a rat or a mouse or a cell or a molecule, you should definitely not allow yourself to be exposed to this. And in the meantime, we have this full-scale experiment using our own kids.
In this interview, Olle is asked about effects of talking on cell phones, especially for children.
But talk for a moment about your thoughts on cell phones.
Yeah.
And people, you know, putting it to their one side of the head and talking a lot every day.
Yeah.
What are your theories about health effects from talking a lot on your cell phone?
Well, I don't need to have any real theories because there are hardcore scientific data regarding this. And if we just stick to the central nervous system, you can see effects all from molecular DNA damage effects to behavioral effects, effects on learning, effects on the electrical activity of the brain, a decrease in sleep, length and quality, the type of sleep is diminished and so on, you know. So there is an enormous wealth, again, just talking about a single organ, the brain, and the impact of the man-made artificial electromagnetic fields.
But how do we know for sure that mobile phones and radiation from that has caused these health effects?
Oh, they are controlled experiments.
It is.
There's just one factor that is different.
But is that out in the open? Has that been?
Oh, indeed, of course, yes. And these are controlled experiments. They're just one factor that is changed before or after exposure, with or without mobile phone or whatever type of experiment. And they are published. They can be accessed from the internet, for instance, and very good reporters and journalists like yourself, they have done radio programs, TV programs, YouTube films, they have done newspaper articles, tabloid articles, journal and magazine articles, and so on. So it has been really very well covered, at least in countries such as Sweden and Denmark and so on.
Why are they still promoting cell phones and even giving them to children? Little children are always carrying a cell phone, right?
I love that question, because it points to that. And there was many years ago an excellent American movie about this, that journalism is, of course, ice cold, and it lacks ethical rules. If there were morals and ethics in this, naturally the newspapers should just block everything, they should stop it. They should not allow any ads and so on. And in some countries, even the parliaments and the governments are reacting. I read, for instance, about Belgium. The Belgian government, they very strongly say that we cannot any longer have ads directed to the children and teenagers. So at least that step they are taking.
Ads, that's not cell phones, huh?
Oh, yeah, ads about cell phones.
Ole, on safety guideline recommendations, note how the levels recommended for the US compare with the other countries here.
Just finally, you have to think a little bit about safety. There are, as you know, guideline recommendations. And this guideline you see as number 2, that's what you live in. That's the Danish guideline, 9 million microwatts per square meter of radiofrequent radiation. And then others have either said or indicated reduced levels. And you see, for instance, the Bioinitiative report in the revised, updated version said 3 microwatts per square meter would be all right. But there is only one hygienic safety level ever produced, and it's proposed by myself. And it's this one, because this is the natural background during normal cosmic activities. This is what you lived in before Finland went into Nokia land. And you see, the difference is just astronomical, biblical.
Describing the cumulative effect of exposure to this irradiation and the birth of the Bioinitiative report.
The same line seeing has also shown that this is a cumulative effect. The more irradiation, the more damage. And I will go back to the previous slide and just remind you of very few customers use their mobile phone only for 24 hours in their whole life. They use it every time, every day, and they also have these iPads, wireless routers, computers, etc. And they are constantly exposed. And the question is this safe or not?
When you read in the scientific literature in well-established and well-controlled research journals, you are struck by the enormous amount of papers clearly showing that these kind of electromagnetic fields we are talking about do have very scary in many instances and very strong effects at the molecular and cellular level, as well as the tissue and organ level, the animal level, the plant, bacteria, and human level. It's very hard to rank the different effects, but if I would try to rank them, I would, and that may be a surprise to many, I would put at the last place the cancer issue. The World Health Organization has cancer classified radiofrequent electromagnetic fields Yes, but from a public health point of view, it's a very, very small question. The big issues are, of course, impacts on, for instance, bacteria, impacts on our immune system, our possibility to produce coming generations that we call fertility, and that kind of issues. And many of them are nowadays on a solid ground, and there has been groups formed, for instance, in the United States, trying to get politicians to understand that they need to reduce the exposure, particularly of women, of pregnant women, of babies, of children and teenagers. And in Sweden, which is in the schooling system one of the most computerized schools in the world, as you know, in the PISA investigation recently been produced, we have dropped dramatically. So even with all these mobile phones, readers, tablets, computers, the pupils are not becoming more and more intelligent. On the contrary, they are doing less and less well, which is quite contrary, but it fits very well with what Henry Lai showed in rats and what these other scientists had shown in young boys. So maybe at this very moment, at least the Western world, we are producing kids and students in our schooling system that come out less good than they used to. And I find it very, very hard to believe that any country or any educational minister or any parent would like that. And therefore, I would welcome an open discussion.
On a more personal level, Olle shares what inspires him.
Ordinary people, especially ordinary people using common sense, that inspires me a lot. And also all living creatures. I'm very fascinated about any living creature, including bacteria, plants, rats, mice, cats, dogs, and so on, and of course human beings. They all fascinate me, and maybe human beings often also go into the other direction. When you look around in the current world, you do get, I would say, shocked and depressed when you see all the famine, the war, the migration due to conflicts, and the way people treat each other. And just yesterday I heard a man saying that since he couldn't befriend with his neighbor, how should then ever countries be able to keep peace, you know? And perhaps human beings need to learn a lot more from other species and try to go into new directions where conflict and progress is not the stamina that we should use, but maybe to take care of each other and above all to use common sense.
And what lights him up these days?
I'd love to ask, I know you are so busy and you're continuing your research and discovering new things. Is there anything that's kind of lighting you up these days about what you're finding, what you're uncovering? What would you like to share with us coming from your work right now?
Well, you know, I'm living in Sweden, and by nature we are all depressed more or less, you know, so we rarely have any positive news. But I think one thing that is very positive and makes me very happy is actually people like yourself, and there are so very many out there that produces independent news. It could be like video blogs or text blogs or interview programs or news channels, and there is such a tremendous amount, and they are, as you are, real experts. They ask the real important questions and they inform the general population. And more I see that people are waking up. And yesterday, believe it or not, I took the underground here in Stockholm, the subway, and it was such a lovely dog, so I had to hug the dog, you know. But then the owner said, "Hey, are you not Olle Johansson?" Yeah, you are the expert on 5G, aren't you? Well, expert, I don't know, but I know a little bit about it. And then I suddenly realized that this man knew who I was. He knew about the research. And when I looked around in this crowded subway car, everyone was listening. Everyone.
Wow. It's like when someone whispers, everyone's listening. Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, that is great. And people can be afraid to broach the question, but if someone else breaks the ice, they can go,
Yeah.
like a dog, cock
Yeah.
their ear. So
Yeah. And also, I would say what we talked about before, I see more and more impacts being made by both commercial but also non-commercial actors that are looking for solutions of various types. And I'm sure within a few years, the whole market will look different. And finally, also, I would like to lift my hat for all lawyers, judges, attorneys, and so forth that right now are pushing for legal claims and legal settlements, which are extremely important. And as you know, for instance, in Italy, here in Europe, several cases have been brought to their Supreme Court and been won, meaning that the brain tumor cases have been legally said to be due to the cell phone.
About 10 years ago, Olle was involved in a controversy at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, where he held a position as head of the Experimental Dermatology Unit, Department of Neuroscience. Just as Johansson was prepared to conduct an independently funded experiment to replicate the science of a Canadian professor whose work led to the cancellation of Wi-Fi and the labeling of cell phones in San Francisco, he was notified that his offices and lab were to be converted to, quote, an animal house for ferrets, unquote. As stated in the article, Suppression of an Inconvenient Science at the Karolinska Institute by Martin Weatherall. These controversial actions evoked its share of pushback, including from Dr. Magda Havas, the Canadian researcher whose work Johansson planned to replicate. She issued an impassioned public statement proclaiming the Karolinska Institute's action as an assault on academic inquiry. Without academic freedom, we are doomed to be corporate pawns, she claims. Olle chats about his work since retirement.
But when I die, I want the last thought to be, I did my best, not I could have done better.
Olle shares his personal test to make sure he's doing good and noble work.
Every evening when I brush my teeth, if I can meet the gaze of my eyes in the bathroom mirror without blushing, then it's fine. If I have to look away and start all over again, then I need to redo whatever I redone before, So that's a good
beautiful.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful, and you're so right.
And it's simple. You really test your own moral and ethical standard just by looking yourself into your own eyes. And if you have to look away, then you know that I have to go up much early the next morning and remake and redo what I did wrong the previous day.
We all can easily see that Olle has so much more work he needs and wants to do, but it takes money. Please consider joining me in contributing to Olle's research. No amount is too small to keep his research going. Johansson's ongoing research will further improve our understanding of how and why electromagnetic fields are harming humans, other animals, plants, and bacteria. Funding for EMF research is sparse. Without continuing research, we cannot move forward, and the future looks bleak indeed. Thank you so much for visiting this presentation. We greatly appreciate your clicking on like and subscribe to further our messages. Bye for now.